Welcome to Dark Whispers, where every whisper hides a scream, and every shadow conceals a secret waiting to be uncovered. This is the case of Sherri Rasmussen. It was a bright, ordinary Monday in Los Angeles, February 24th, 1986. The kind of day when the California sun streams through the windows and life feels like it's moving forward, steady and hopeful. For 29-year-old Sherri Rasmussen, it should have been just another morning. She had so much to look forward to. She was newly married, deeply in love with her husband John, and building her career as a respected nurse. But that morning, Sherri felt uneasy. The night before, she had confided in her parents that someone had been bothering her. A woman who seemed to show up again and again, lurking like a shadow in her new marriage. Sherri brushed it off, trying not to worry them too much. She was strong, independent, but she was afraid. By evening, John came home to their Van Nuys apartment. The second he opened the door, the air changed. Silence pressed in. The living room was destroyed. Glass shattered across the floor. Furniture knocked over. Drawers pulled out. At first glance, it looked like a burglary, but something was wrong. Something felt too violent, too chaotic. Then he saw her. Sherri was lying on the floor, lifeless. Her body bore the signs of a brutal fight. Her face bruised, her arm bearing the mark of a human bite, and 3 bullets in her chest. She had been ambushed, beaten, and executed in her own home. Detectives swarmed the apartment, and the official story formed quickly. A robbery gone wrong. Some valuables were missing. The place was ransacked. The theory fit on the surface, but the scene whispered something else. The bite mark, the sheer rage of the attack, the way it seemed personal, intimate, filled with hatred. And when police began talking to Sherri's family, a name surfaced almost immediately: Stephanie Lazarus. Stephanie was no stranger. She was a Los Angeles police officer, one of their own. Years earlier, before Sherri had met John, Stephanie had dated him. She never got over him. Even after John married Sherri, Stephanie kept pushing herself into their lives, confronting Sherri at work, reminding her that she and John had once been together. Sherri had told her parents more than once, "This woman scares me." But in 1986, investigators brushed the idea aside. How could a fellow officer, one of their colleagues, be a murderer? The burglary theory stayed. Leads fizzled, and Sherri's case went cold. For more than 20 years, her parents lived with the pain. They begged detectives to look deeper. They never believed it was just a robbery. They always believed Stephanie had blood on her hands. But the file gathered dust. Then, in 2005, everything changed. Cold case detectives reopened Sherri's murder. By then, technology had caught up with the evidence. They looked at the bite mark again. Back in the 80s, it had been swabbed for saliva. That swab had been sitting in storage for decades. Now DNA testing was possible. The results were explosive. The DNA from the bite mark belonged to a woman. That single discovery cracked the case wide open. Suddenly, all those warnings from Sherri's family, all those suspicions, came rushing back into focus. Stephanie Lazarus, now a respected veteran detective with the LAPD, was quietly placed under investigation. But how do you investigate one of your own? Someone trained, armed, and trusted? They couldn't just storm in and accuse her. They had to play it smart. For months, detectives watched Stephanie from a distance. They followed her, waiting for her to slip up, to leave behind something they could test. Then one day, they saw her at a cafe, sipping a drink through a straw. When she walked away, they grabbed it. That straw carried her DNA. The lab results confirmed what Sherri's parents had been saying for decades. The DNA from the bite mark was a perfect match. Stephanie Lazarus had killed Sherri Rasmussen. Now came the hardest part: arresting a police officer without tipping her off. Detectives lured her into an interrogation room at the very station where she worked. They told her they needed her expertise on an old case. She walked in confidently, smiling, a veteran cop ready to share her wisdom. But then the questions shifted. They asked about John, about Sherri, about 1986. Stephanie laughed nervously. She deflected. She claimed she barely remembered Sherri at all. But under the surface, she knew. The walls were closing in. Finally, the trap snapped shut. They confronted her with the DNA evidence, the bite mark that had preserved her crime for over 2 decades. She was arrested, right there, in her own police department. The trial began in 2012. The courtroom was electric, packed with reporters, family members, and former colleagues who could hardly believe what they were hearing. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture: a jealous ex-girlfriend who could not let go, who stalked her rival, and who finally snapped. Sherri had been beaten, bitten, and executed, not by a burglar, but by the woman who once wore a badge of trust. The defense argued. They claimed the evidence was circumstantial, that too much time had passed. But the jury didn't waver. The DNA was undeniable. The obsession, the harassment, the rage, it all fit. Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. For Sherri's family, justice had come, but it had taken 26 long years. They had fought against silence, against disbelief, against the system itself, just to be heard. The murder of Sherri Rasmussen remains one of the most haunting cases in Los Angeles history. A young woman, full of promise, killed in her own home. A police officer, sworn to serve and protect, revealed to be the predator. A case dismissed as a robbery, until science and persistence brought the truth to light. It is a story about obsession, about betrayal, about how evil can hide in plain sight, even behind a badge. But it is also a story of perseverance, because no matter how carefully someone hides their crime, the truth waits. Sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, but eventually it surfaces. And when it does, it speaks louder than lies. Sherri Rasmussen's voice was stolen, but science, persistence, and justice spoke for her.